Good afternoon. Good morning, Nova Nation. I did that last week as well. Welcome inside of our WXVU studio for another episode of Villanova Sports Talk here on a Thursday. David Szczepanski, Stephen Cain, and Mike Micceri with you. A lot to get to here on this Thursday morning. We're going to kind of move pretty quick here, but just to give everybody a quick rundown, I'll of course get over to Steve and Mike in just a few moments. We're going to talk about men's lacrosse with Mike. It's a new segment we're going to call here on WXVU. We'll talk about the Penn State win, one of the best wins in a long time for Villanova men's lacrosse. We'll talk about the St. Joe's game coming up on Saturday, some players to watch, and an overall season preview. We'll also have Steve Pinone, Villanova men's basketball legend, join us at 11:30 a.m. So coming up in just about 30 minutes, we'll talk with Steve Pinone. A lot to get to here on this Thursday. But before we fully get into all the action, I want to first check in with Steve and Mike. Mike, I'm going to check in with you. It's been a long time since we've had you here on the show, but great to have you back. And it's men's lacrosse season, so it's a good time of year. Weather's getting warmer. How you doing?
It has. Great to be back. Thanks for having me back on. I'm so excited to be here. Talk about men's lacrosse a little bit. I mean, we saw a great start to the season. We'll get into it a little bit more in a minute. But yeah, just little introductions. Happy to be back.
And then for me, happy to be back. Weekly episode once again. And yeah, as you said, David, a lot to get to. Men's, women's basketball. Men's team really scraped by against Marquette. We'll talk about that. And then a dominant performance against Xavier. And then we talked about it, on Saturday. It was the men's team won, the women's team won, but we were talking probably the men's lacrosse game was probably the biggest
win of the weekend.
Biggest win of the weekend at overtime, so we'll get to that as well.
And so a lot to get to, obviously, here. And I do want to apologize to all those that are watching on YouTube. You can't see Steve for this episode, so he's just going to be a mystery, kind of hidden behind the wall over there. But I promise he's here. But great to be with you here on this Thursday, and we have a lot to get to, of course, over the next 60 minutes. But before we get into the men's lacrosse action and just kind of give our brief thoughts on both men's basketball and women's basketball, let's get to the poll questions. As always, you can vote on my Twitter at WXVU David S. First poll question was, who was the player of the week for Villanova men's basketball? Caden Lewis, Duke Brennan, Tyler Perkins, or Matt Hodge? Poll question 2, what will be the final result of Saturday's game against Creighton in Omaha? Villanova wins by 1 to 6 points. Villanova wins by 7+. Creighton wins by 1 to 5 points, or Creighton wins by 6+. Poll question 3, with the Wildcats' victory against Xavier, Villanova is now 20-5 this season. How many wins will the women's basketball team finish with in the regular season with 4 games left to go? 20 to 21 wins, 22 wins, 23 wins, or 24 wins? Poll question 4, which team has the best chance of winning the Big East tournament as of right now? UConn, St. John's, and Villanova, and that is the closest poll of them all. So we'll discuss that towards the end of the show. Steve and I will give our thoughts in the final 5 or so minutes. All right, well, before we get into the men's lacrosse talk with Mike, we're going to get to the big win for the women's basketball team last night. A 40-point victory against Xavier, and that was the largest win for the women's basketball team since 2023. You have to go back. Let me just make sure I got the stat right. December 30th of 2023, coincidentally perhaps, against Xavier, when Villanova had its last 40-point win. It was a 78-38 win for the Wildcats. Steve, last night. Obviously, we'd love to dive into this game a little bit more and give you more of a preview of the games coming up, especially a game against Creighton in Omaha. But Steve, just kind of want to get your quick thoughts here on this game. I mean, Baska was great once again. I mean, she's really solidifying herself as a star in the Big East. But in addition to that, I mean, I think she's got a chance at Big East Player of the Year. If Villanova makes a deep run and maybe wins the final 4 games, well, I should say 3 of the 4 with the UConn, but makes the UConn game close, they play really well against Marquette and Seton Hall, perhaps pick up their 2 biggest wins of the season in terms of Big East play. Baska's got as good of a case, I think, as anybody. I mean, Sarah Strong is a great player. I said that last week, and we can talk about that a little bit more. But what Baska has done, I mean, the way that she's played in the last 5 games, in my opinion, Villanova doesn't win 4 of the 5 without her, and that's a difference, and that's what I think it means to be Big East Player of the Year. So Baska, she's playing really well, and that's where I'll kind of hand it over to you, Steve.
She was also very efficient, too, I might add, because she does get a lot of shots. It's no secret. Her usage rate's been through the roof the past few games. It's felt like Denise Dillon has made a concerted effort to get the ball into Bosco's hands as much as possible. But just a really great win. I was following along a little bit, tracking the score on ESPN, and it was kind of a decent start in the first quarter, and then around the later part of the second quarter, Villanova started to pull away, and then the third quarter, they really came out like gangbusters.
It was crazy. The second half turnaround was
maybe their best quarter of the year. 37 points. They had 13 assists. Yeah. I counted this. I don't even know if Stat Broadcast keeps track of it in just the third quarter. And their 3-point shooting wasn't great after the first 20 minutes of play, under 20%, but they put that up to about about over 35%. And then in the fourth quarter, they struggled a little bit, but the game was well out of reach by that point. They ended up shooting 33%. But yeah, it was a dominant performance. They out-rebounded Xavier by 21. They had 48 rebounds.
Wow.
And again, 31-7 points off of turnovers, and Xavier had 22 turnovers. Now, Villanova had 14, but to speed up that Xavier team, and more importantly, 16 of those were steals. And Kennedy Henry, in terms of her defensive performance, was just phenomenal. 9 steals, had 6 of them in the first half. Again, Villanova just did a great job getting out and running and taking advantage of Xavier in the open court and being great scoring the basketball on the inside as well. Being 22 of 39 from 2. So really just a lot of great stuff there. And then finally 25-8 in the assist battle. Xavier's one of the worst teams in the country at preventing assists. So just a great performance. Bryn Micceri was also really efficient, 15 points, 6 of 8 from the field at 4 rebounds, 4 assists. Ryan Allen was great in the second half, 11 points, 4 rebounds, 3 assists. So again, they did what they needed to do, quad 4 win. They're up to 20 wins, and it's still mid-February, so that's always a good sign.
Yeah, and this was the best the offense looked, in my opinion, in a long time. I mean, we've been kind of asking for it, can we put everything together and have a complete 40 minutes of basketball? And Villanova did that last night. I mean, the defense was stellar. And look, I know that Xavier is towards the bottom of the Big East, a team that's really struggled, only 4 conference wins coming into the game. Villanova all-time was 23-1 heading into the matchup against Xavier last night. So, I mean, they've dominated the series over the years against the Musketeers. But this was still an extremely impressive performance for Villanova. Bosco played well. Micceri had her best game in a few weeks. Kennedy Henry did struggle offensively, was 3 for 13 from the field. But like you said, I mean, her defense, the team's defense as a whole, was just stellar to hold a Big East team to 38 points. It's remarkable. And now, like you said, Steve, Villanova 20-5. And, I know that this win probably doesn't do a whole lot for them in terms of, the resume, right? A quad 4 win on the road. But I think in terms of confidence, it's going to help this team, right? You have a big stretch coming up, as I talked about. You have at Creighton, you have Marquette, you have Seton Hall coming up, teams that you really have to beat, especially with Villanova kind of being right on the edge of March Madness. So a big win for the Wildcats last night. The defense was really good. The offense had its best performance in a long time. And hopefully this win can really catapult Villanova because, I mean, you look at the end of the day, they've won 5 straight games. But I think, Steve, it was fair to say when we sat here last week, you were kind of asking for more out of this offense. You were asking for more because you know the potential is there with how much depth this Villanova team has. So I thought this win, they put it all together. Now let's see how they close out the month of February. Big stretch time because we were talking about it a little bit off air, Steve. The women's team, unlike last year, is ahead of the men's team when it comes to games. So this is really kind of much later in the season with only a few games left to go. All right, so obviously we'd love to talk about more the women's team, but a big 40-point win, 78-38. That's how we want to begin the program. It's now time to get to men's lacrosse talk with Mike, our new favorite segment here on Villanova Sports Talk. Again, David Szczepanski, Stephen Cain, Mike Micceri with you. So, Mike, the men's lacrosse team played really well the other day. A win against Penn State in overtime, and it really had all the thrillers. It was a top highlight, I believe, on ESPN for the day, just with how good men's lacrosse has been at Penn State for a long time. So, of course, want to bring in our in-house expert. Who better to talk Nova lacrosse than Mike Micceri? Classes in session, everybody. Mike, just want to start with your overall thoughts on this win, and I guess just kind of where this puts Villanova for the season to go. Was this, I mean, I think that it's fair to say that I think people expected the game to be somewhat competitive, but
which it was.
Where would you take the assumptions of, would it be maybe an overstatement to say this could be a very big year for men's lacrosse, or do you think that kind of fits the mold? What are your takes?
Listen, I absolutely loved the start to the season. It was an incredible game, an awesome finish. Dan Martin sealed it off with an incredible shot. Part of me wants to say temper expectations a little bit just because this first game, Villanova, it's a tradition. They play Penn State the first game of the season for a while now. The last time Villanova won was back in 2023. The last 2 seasons they lost. Last year they lost to Penn State in the opener by 10, 15-5. So this was a big turnaround for Villanova, but I wouldn't say get too crazy with your expectations just yet.
All right, pump on the brakes a little bit, but we're excited and for good reason.
Yes, and there's great reasons on the Villanova side of it too. I mean, you lost one of your best players, leading players for many years, Matt Licata. He was actually just picked up by the Boston Cannon, so he's going to join Matt Campbell, which is one of the better players from Villanova that we've ever seen. And so he's gone, but they've replaced it with a couple really good young guys. It was a full throttle effort against Penn State as well. I mean, you had guys scoring from pretty much every grade level there is at Villanova, including the 2 grad students in Dan Martin and Luke Raymond. So it was just an awesome effort and a great way to start the season, and we'll see how they can, transition and take things in the couple games that they have ahead.
Well, I thought it was really impressive, too. I mean, you said it. There were so many different, I guess, to beat a team like Penn State, you need to have so many different players play a key role. But specifically, Nick Lucchesi had 4 points. He had a hat trick for Villanova to lead the way. But a few different players with 2 goals as well. Colin Mishner, once again, shows up on the stat sheet. No surprise there. I know one of the biggest issues, perhaps, for the men's lacrosse team over the past couple of years has been kind of finding, that goaltender that can really stand out and help Villanova. Where do the Wildcats stand in terms of the goaltending for this team heading into the campaign?
Listen, they have 2 guys who are still competing. I would definitely say competing for that starting spot. They started Dennis Varjone, who's a year younger than Anthony Wilson, and he's a great player, and he played well versus Penn State. I mean, holding an offense like that, Penn State's always notorious for having one of the best offenses in all of college lacrosse, and he held them to 13 goals. He played well, had 5 saves. I don't know if that starting job has been solidified yet. That's really up to head coach Mike Corrado, and we'll see where he goes in the future. But I think Dennis Varjone had a really good completion of the last season, and he's carried it over nicely during this first game. So I would assume he'll be starting again versus St. Joe's on Saturday, but we'll see how things go afterwards.
Now, Penn State did have 20 turnovers in this matchup against Villanova, which was a big difference, but Villanova didn't do all that well in the face-off category, 18 to 13. So I know, we've also talked about that over the last couple of years in terms of the face-offs, how important that is to really get the possession set up. So, Mike, what is kind of your, thoughts on the turnover situation in this game, but specifically just face-offs for Villanova this year?
Yeah,
Who is the face-off man?
Face-offs, to me, is the area where Villanova has to improve the most if they want to keep on this wave of being a heavy contender. Their clears is another area where we talked about in the past that clearing in lacrosse is so important. It's the way that you, after a turnover or a shot saved on your defensive side of the field, it's how you get into the offensive side of the field and set up your offensive attack. So I think Villanova improved on that incredibly this game. Compared to the last couple of years. They were 28 for 29 clearing, which is 97%. That's incredible, of course. From the face-off X is another area where, those moments in the middle of the field where you're fighting for possession, that face-off is so huge. Luckily, you have Jake Melchione, who's an incredible LSM for Villanova. He's on the Tour-Tom watch list, and he's someone that is able to scoop up ground balls at a really high level, which is huge off the face-off. But in terms of getting the clamp down and winning the face-off themselves, Villanova has 2 guys kind of competing for that spot right now in George Glome and Ryan Cunningham. They both were okay from the face-off X. Villanova went 13 of 31, so not incredible. Penn State's been pretty good at face-offs for the last couple of years, and so we'll see who they have moving forward. I would assume it's going to be Ryan Cunningham starting, but like was shown throughout this game, they're pretty much going to split the face-offs. I would say 50-50 for the foreseeable future until someone can solidify that they deserve and own that spot on the X.
And I think if Villanova wants to, progress as far as I think many people want them to, they have to get that figured out probably in the earlier part of this season than the latter. And just want to talk about some key players to watch this year for Villanova, right? Nick Lucchesi led the team with 3 goals, but also, of course, Colin Mishner, Luke Raymond, Kessie Cox as well. Just who are some players that you can really focus on for this men's lacrosse team this season? Yeah,
this is why I think this Villanova lacrosse team is so incredibly interesting. They have a lot of players from, like I said, a bunch of different grade levels. And that was kind of like, it was your prototypical, in this game, you had the young guys. Kessie Cox is a freshman who
it was really impressive.
Head coach Mike Corrado's talked a lot about. He was ranked in the top 100 of recruits coming, number 92. He's a 4-star recruit, signed with Villanova, of course. And he had 2 goals in his first game as a freshman. He was great, as well as, and then you have your grad students. Dan Martin finishes it off. So it's like the young guys are carrying you through, not carrying, but progressing you through this entire game, and it's at the end during those clutch moments where the grad students, the guys who have been there, the experienced players, you start to lean on them heavily to finish the game off, and that's exactly what Dan Martin did. He took 2 back-to-back shots, the second of which went in to close out the game. So I think that in the past it's been a lot of, not necessarily a one-man show, but you've been heavily leaning on guys like Matt Licata or Matt Campbell these past couple years, and now I think you can pass the rock around a little bit more. Of course, Nick Lucchesi is the guy he's going to dodge. He's a pretty strong midfielder who can get to the net. He's quick. He can make quick, swift moves, get to the net, and score. But then you have a bunch of guys like the freshmen who I've mentioned, and grad students, Dan Martin, Luke Raymond, who can really be effective when they get the ball in their stick.
Well, over the past couple of years, we've talked about how important Matt Licata has been to this team. Led the team in goals of 28 last year, also had 12 assists, 40 points, took 103 shots last year. I know that we've talked about your thoughts about passing the ball around a little bit more with Colin Mishner, but who do you think really is kind of that guy when it comes to fourth quarter, need a goal, whose stick is really to focus on in the fourth quarter of these big clutch time situations?
Listen, right now, your shooter on this Villanova team is Colin Michener. Right? He might have one of the best shots in all of college.
So do you think he ends the season leading the team in goals?
I would say, like, from the start, it would either be him or Nick Lucchesi. Nick Lucchesi is going to be your facilitator. He's going to carry the ball a lot from in the midfield rotation. He's, of course, on that midi line one, so he's going to be carrying the ball a ton. But Michener is going to be the guy you're looking for on the man-up situation. You're going to be trying to find Colin Michener, get the ball in his stick, and let him unleash that huge cannon that he has.
And you have to love Lucchesi and Michener, two local guys. I mean, Lucchesi grew up here in Villanova, around the Radnor area, and then Michener as well, again, was second in the team last year on goals, grew up in Plymouth Meeting as a senior now, so 6'3" is Michener. So two local guys leading the way for Villanova. You have to love kind of that hometown story here for this team. Now, Mike, I think we're also going to go back to last year's schedule, 8-7 overall. Where do you kind of put a bow on things from last year, if you will, and kind of look ahead to this year? I mean, it was a slow start for Villanova a season ago. They lost 3 of their first 4 games, including a loss to Penn State, Colgate, and Lehigh. So where do you kind of wrap up the season from last year and look ahead to the rest of the schedule this campaign?
Yeah, listen, last year was a tough year. They made a couple decent stretches towards the end. But I think this year is very, very different. I mean, you saw, like I've said, a couple big names have stepped out of the Villanova roster now, and you have a couple different guys who are going to have to step up, and I think it's a fun season. Like, I think that there's a ton of potential on this Villanova roster, a lot of opportunity to spin the ball around, to have a bunch of different guys in play and scoring goals for this Villanova offense, and I think if they their defense has a lot of returning players as well. So, and their defense was when everyone's healthy. Obviously, David Evanchik, one of the premier defenders on this Villanova Lacrosse roster, he was hurt for a couple games last year, so they didn't have him. They didn't have that full healthy defense for the majority of the season, and right now they do. They have a couple seniors. Evanchik's a senior. Jack Shoemaker, he's a senior. He's a captain on this Villanova Lacrosse defense, and so their defense is going to be a pretty sound component of this lacrosse team. And if that's the case, that sets the offense going. The offense has plenty of talent to capitalize on good defensive situations and on teams that are maybe lacking a little bit defensively and prove that they can score at a really high level with some of these premier offensive teams like Penn State. That was a great showing against a team that has always been one of the most dominant offensive programs in lacrosse.
Well, the buzz is here. You can feel it around campus. People, saw the highlight of the game winner against Penn State, and people are buying in, right? I think it's key for Villanova to take advantage of this momentum for both the men's and women's lacrosse team to play well the rest of the season. And the home opener is coming up this Saturday. We're going to have coverage for you here on WXVU beginning at 11:45 a.m. with the pregame show. Now, looking at Villanova's opponent, St. Joe's, a team that it's really hard to tell how really good they are, right? They lost 20-2 in the first game, so they're 0-1, but they played the second best team in the country in Syracuse. So very hard to kind of fully judge. Now, Penn State number 7, but there is a gap there, of course, between Syracuse and Penn State. So 20-2 loss for St. Joe's in the first game. Now going to play Villanova. What are the keys to the game for the Wildcats in this one against St. Joe's? I think it's fair to say that Villanova's favored to win this matchup, but how would you kind of break it down, Mike?
St. Joe's is a bit of an interesting team the last couple of years as well. They've had some pretty big upsets. They have guys who can score. Obviously, the Syracuse team is absolutely loaded this year. They have a bunch of returning players, guys who have been there for a while now. They have one of the best players in the country in Joey Spallina. There's so much talent, so it's hard. Like I said about the Villanova-Penn State game, obviously, you want to make an assumption and have a prediction after that first game, but it's very difficult to do. You want to get a couple under your belt to really understand what a team looks like going forward. But that game against Syracuse is really tough to tell, just because they are one of the top programs. I expect that score adjacent to that for Syracuse a bunch of times throughout the season. So I think, yes, it's safe to say that this should be a Villanova win, and I think that's what people are expecting, is that Villanova, the Wildcats, are going to come out on top. But this should be a game where they start cleaning up on some of the question marks for this season, the ones that we talked about. Hopefully, Dennis Farjoni could get a little bit more experience under him throughout the start of the season and feel more comfortable in his role, hopefully as the starting goalkeeper. And then on the face-off X, maybe get a couple more wins under your belt and, start to just... It was a great first game, really. Their offense looked great. The clearing was awesome. So a lot of times it takes teams a couple of games to really get the clear down and understand how they want to progress throughout to the offensive zone of the field. So I think just, clean up on those mistakes, and this should be this should be a Villanova outcome in favor of the Wildcats.
Well, last year, St. Joe's defeated Villanova 12-8. That was on Hawk Hill, so the Wildcats looking for some revenge this year. In terms of some players to watch, right, St. Joe's 9-6 overall last year. A team that played really well on the road, 5-2. I want to talk about Ben Dutton, who returns. He led St. Joe's with 47 goals, 55 points and 8 assists, 122 shots. Dutton was definitely a key performer on that St. Joe's team, but also want to focus on the face-off man, Connor Trant, who was also back for the Hawks, 133 for 293 last year. Those are two of the key players to watch for St. Joe's. Who are some other players, or maybe if you just want to add on to what I mentioned about Dutton and Trant there for St. Joe's, Mike?
No, I think the Dutton matchup is going to be really cool. I would assume Villanova is going to put some of their best. They might slide Jake Melchioni from the LSM position and have him guard Dutton, but it's definitely going to be something to look out for. We mentioned a couple times last year Villanova's help on the slides was a bit of a problem. So after the on-ball defender gets beat, there were a couple times where it looked a little bit delayed, where the next slide came to collapse on that offensive player who was making the move towards goal. So we'll see if this is a situation where, one man gets beat. You can't, in lacrosse, it's really difficult to play defense. You can't just rely on the on-ball defender. It's a total team cohort effort. And so we'll see if the next man is able to slide and step on someone like Dutton. And then in terms of the face-off acts, Trenton's one of the top face-off guys in college lacrosse. He's been really good. And so we'll see how they can close him out. That'll be a really good test for the face-off guys on Villanova.
I think what's interesting for St. Joe's is this was a defense last year that was really stellar. They only gave up about 8.6 goals per game. Now, towards the second half of the season, they did struggle a little bit against High Point and against Richmond, but they went on a stretch where they put together 7 consecutive wins from February the 18th to March 22nd, which included that win against Villanova kind of in the midway point of that stretch. But during that stretch, this would team, I'll read you the goals they allowed from February 18th to March 22nd. 3 goals against Monmouth, 6 against Towson, 5 against RU, 11 against Drexel, 8 against Villanova, 10 against Penn, and 8 against Providence. So they really did a great job defensively last year. I think it's hard to gauge because the first game against Syracuse was so lopsided, right, 20-2. How good is the defense for St. Joe's? We'll find out a little bit more against Villanova this upcoming weekend, but those are definitely some key things to watch. Mike, before we let you go, just kind of want to take a look at the upcoming schedule for the Wildcats, right? You have a couple road games, 3 road games in a row after this home opener against St. Joe's, at Rutgers, at Delaware, at Drexel, before coming home for 2 straight against UPenn and Towson. Then you end the year with some tough games. You end the game at home, or end the season at home against Georgetown. Also have a game against Denver and Providence. The Big East schedule has a couple big home games coming up for Villanova this year. But where do you kind of rate the schedule for Villanova this year? Where are some games that maybe could be, potentially be kind of those eye openers and things for Nova Nation to focus on?
Yeah, of course. You're always Big East play opens on Saturday, March 28th. You're always looking forward to the Big East play. Obviously, that opener against Penn State is always something that you're circling on the calendar, not only because it's the opener, but because it is Penn State as well. You're going to be looking for the Big East matchups. You're going to be looking for Georgetown. That's always a
big game, and it's here on our turf this year, so that should be fun.
Perfect, yeah. That'll be a lot of fun. That's a huge matchup for Villanova, something to look out for. There's a ton of history between those two programs, so I think that's definitely one you're circling on the schedule. And then it's always just the start of Big East play. You're playing St. John's on the 28th, and so that'll be a fun one to get Villanova going in their own conference matchups.
Well, we are excited. We are ready to go here on WXVU. Again, tune into our coverage this Saturday. Mike Micceri and I will have the call. 11:40 a.m. pregame show. Noon will be the opening face-off from Villanova Stadium. Hoping to have a good crowd out there as well at Villanova Stadium to support the Wildcats against St. Joe's. Also, too, want to talk about the women's lacrosse team's opener against Towson. It was a game that was rescheduled due to the extreme cold on Sunday, pushed back to Monday at 2, and it was a really great dominating performance for the Wildcats. 15-6 at Villanova Stadium against Towson. Good start for the Wildcats coming off of a great campaign last year, and just specifically in this game, the Wildcats just kept getting so many shots on goal against this Towson defense. Villanova ended the game scoring 9 goals in the final 2 periods, got off to a 4-1 start there in the first quarter, and just when you take a look at shots on goal, Villanova 22 compared to Towson's 9. That was something to definitely watch in this game. And then just in terms of goals, you had Catherine Monaco with a hat trick, as well as Bella Pacelli with a hat trick for the Wildcats as well. So the Wildcats, a lot of shots on goal. Defense played well against a Towson team that the Wildcats should have defeated. So the Villanova is now 1-0. Will take on number 10 Navy on the road this Saturday. We'll keep an eye on that game in Annapolis. Should be a fun one there as well. This has been our first lacrosse segment of the year. Always great to talk with you, Mike. Men's Lacrosse with Mike, the new segment here on WXVU.
Great to be here.
Great to be with you here, Mike, and stay tuned. Nova Nation coming up in just about 5 minutes. Steve Pinone, men's basketball legend, will join the show to talk about everything Villanova men's basketball, so looking forward to that. Don't touch the dial. We'll be right back. Again, you're listening to Villanova Sports Talk here on WXVU V89.1, The Roar. Welcome back to Villanova Sports Talk here on WXVU. David Szczepanski alongside Steve Cain. Steve Pinone will join us in just a few moments to talk about everything Villanova men's basketball. But Steve, some Villanova football news. Garrett Rogan, defensive back for the Wildcats, is back for his 5th year. Had 33 total tackles last year for the Wildcats. For a defense that, has going to lose a lot of key starters from last year, Rogan is a key piece, strong safety for the Wildcats. So good to have him back. Just your initial reactions to hearing Garrett Rogan coming back for the Wildcats.
As you said, it's a great day to be a Villanova football fan, because I thought he was super solid in terms of run support.
He definitely was.
Coming downhill, making tackles, mixing up in the run game. And with no Hawkins, no Demille Bostic, the secondary, I'm sure Villanova will.
No Zamir Dawood.
Yeah, no Zamir Dawood. You could go on and on, right? Besides really Newton Essiem, there aren't really a lot of other I would say notable starters from last season's team that'll be on this upcoming season's team. So it's good to have Rogan back. He really impressed in training camp. That's how he ended up getting a main defensive starting role on the team, and again, just very versatile, kind of a big-bodied corner that can, again, mix it up with some of the linebackers. He's very physical, so great to have him back. We were talking about it'll be a grad year for him, so it definitely will bring a lot of maturity to that back end of the defense.
And Villanova football had a practice yesterday morning, so coming off of the FCS semifinals, and that's what's so good about making a deep run in the FCS playoffs is this I don't want to say early spring practices, but we're going to call it, late winter practices come around much quicker. So great to have the Wildcats practicing once again. Again, Garrett Rogan is returning to the Wildcats for his 5th year, finished the 2025 campaign with 33 total tackles. We'll take a break here on Villanova Sports Talk. On the other side, Steve Pinone will join us. Again, we'll discuss Villanova's win against Marquette. A win is a win, as they say. Great teams find ways to win gritty battles. Villanova did that, and we'll also preview Villanova's game in Omaha on Valentine's Day. We'll be right back in 30 seconds here on WXVU V89.1, The Roar. Welcome back to Villanova Sports Talk here on this Thursday, February 12th on WXVU V89.1, The Roar. David Szczepanski alongside Steve Cain, and we have Steve squared in studio as Steve Pinone is with us. And Steve, you definitely don't need an introduction, but I'll do a brief one. Serves as Senior Director of Advancement for Men's Basketball, a position that you've been in since 2008. You broadcast a bunch of sports here at Villanova, in addition to co-hosting Coach Ferrante's show there in the fall. In addition to that, of course, you're a member of the 1985 NCAA national champion. So national champion Steve Pinone is with us. And Steve, how you doing on this Thursday?
I'm doing great, David. Steve, appreciate you having me on. And my father taught me when I was young, if you wear a lot of hats, it's hard to get rid of you. So that's what I tried to do when I've been here. I've been very blessed to be here for a long time and doing a lot of wonderful things.
Well, Steve, we of course want to talk about the Wildcats on the court, but before we do that, just want to talk about your role here at Villanova. As I said, you've served as the Senior Director of Advancement for Men's Basketball since 2008. What does your everyday routine look like in this role?
In this role, it's basically, everyone talks about NIL, and it's revenue generating for athletics. So it could be primarily men's basketball, but I'm kind of tasked with bringing in revenue for the athletic department. That's usually through philanthropic gifts from alumni, parents, friends of the program.
And yeah, Steve, you're also, of course, a broadcaster for a variety of Villanova sports, including, and David mentioned, Coach Ferrante's talk show. What has your broadcasting journey been like, and in particular, what's kind of been your favorite part of being a Villanova broadcaster?
I like that. Thanks, Steve. It's a good question. My journey is interesting. I was before I was in development, I was an assistant basketball coach here. I worked for Rolly Massimino for 4 years, Steve Lapis for 9, and then made a transition in administration. And what happened was it was kind of the spawn of this streaming services. So it was kind of what we call Villanova. It was like All Access or Villanova Sports Network. And Jake Retton oversees now that David's done some water polo one I saw over the weekend. And we started doing that for football. And Dean Kennefick, who's our Director of Media Relations, Associate AD, came to me and said, hey, we need a guy to do some football. And I said, well, I appreciate that. I never played football here, but is that okay? And they were like, no, and it worked out really well. And I understand not being a football player, them giving me that opportunity was, I wouldn't say unusual, but giving me that kind of break was great. So I've been doing that. I actually started doing that. And then the next season, we started doing the non-conference men's basketball games. And Bob Stites, who was overseeing that, offered me that position, so I've done that. So I've had an opportunity to do men's and women's soccer in the fall, men's and women's hoops in the winter. And in the spring, I do baseball, softball, and then Coach Ferrante show and some football. Also, obviously, all fall either on radio or on streaming.
Well, you do a great job in that role,
you.
Steve. And, you, of course, have two children. It was Steven, who was a former men's basketball manager. Also, Matt, baseball alum, graduated in 2022. Just what does Villanova mean to you? How important is it for you to be here and be so involved in the community?
Yeah, I grew up in Connecticut, so 4 hours away in Hartford, Connecticut. My older brother, John, came here 4 years ahead of me. He graduated in 1983. Was a great player here, was an All-American. I just happened to show up at the right time to win a championship, but he was a 2,000-point scorer, an All-American. So Villanova's been a huge part of my life since I was about 14 years old. I remember going to games and they were recruiting my brother John in like 10th and 11th grade, going up to see him play UMass when they were back in the Eastern 8. And then to have the opportunity to work here basically for my whole adult life. I was gone for 8 months. I left in August of 91 and came back in April of 92. Spent 1 year coaching at Manhattan College for Steve Lapis. So other than that kind of 8 months there, I've been at Villanova my whole adult life. And it's just been blessed. Then to have two kids graduate from here. My oldest son Steve's doing really well up on Wall Street, doing great. My younger son Matt's now down in Charlotte as a civil engineer, doing really well as well. So Villanova's had such a huge impact on me personally, but my whole family.
Well, that's awesome. And, now to the team on the court, Steve. The Wildcats are 19-5, seem to control the 3 seed for the moment, at least in the Big East. What are your thoughts on this year's team? How have they looked to you?
This is one of the best coaching jobs I've ever seen. Coach Willard deserves all the credit in the world, and I've been around a lot of great coaches here over the years. But when I went and saw this team in June and July in the summer, Coach Willard would invite me in with some donors just to kind of get to meet everybody and see everybody. I just didn't know what the talent level would be, and I didn't have a good comparison to what I kind of knew what UConn had because they had a lot of guys back, but I didn't, they brought in a lot of what you would consider mid-major transfers where they weren't getting the high profile like UConn brings in Demery from Georgia, St. John's is bringing in guys from higher level programs, and I just didn't know what the talent level looked like. But what Kevin Willard has done with this group in terms of role definition, finding identity, the ability to play hard for 40 minutes. And when I talk to all our donors and alums post-game, it's always about we have an identity again. We have, like Jay Wright used to call it, Villanova basketball. We have Villanova basketball again. They know how they're going to play. They know their roles. They know what coach is expecting of them, and they've really played their roles out really well.
I agree with that, Steve. It has been really impressive. Willard, just in his first year, has Villanova on the precipice of 20 wins. And kind of moving into the next question, Villanova, they're a very young team, right? They rely on a Caden Lewis, Bryce, Lindsay, Matt Hodge, 3 of their starters being underclassmen. As someone with national championship experience, how important are some of the veterans on this team? Duke Brennan, the senior from Grand Canyon, and then Devin Askew, who's been all over the map, Kentucky, Texas, Cal, Long Beach State. How important are those guys just to offer some experience?
Steve, I think they're really important because younger guys, can accept a role. Hey, I'm a freshman. I'll figure out. Hey, if I get some playing time, that's good. Or when you're a senior, when you're Devin Askew and you've been well traveled, like you mentioned, you think this guy, he's it's my last go around. I want to play. I want to score. I want to do all these different things. And he's been a great mentor for Caden Lewis. He's just said, hey, I'll take you under my wing. I'll teach you the ropes of college basketball. He's been outstanding. Duke Brennan will go and do all the dirty work. He's not worried about how many points he scores. I'll get you double-figure rebounds. I'll guard their inside player. I'll be physical every game. Those two guys specifically, and then I know we're going to talk a little bit about Tyler Perkins as a kind of an upperclassman as a junior as well. Those 3 guys really have set the tone for these younger guys allowed to make some mistakes, be young, but kind of go on from mistakes, not put your head down. I love the body language of the team. I say it on just about every post-game show. Someone makes a mistake. How about a Caden Lewis? Airballs a foul shot the other night. This is a guy who's a high school All-American airballs, and then has the audacity to grab the ball again, go right to the basket, knowing he's going to get fouled, and he knocks down 2. Those kind of things, the confidence that the older guys give these younger guys, I think has been a big part of it, Steve.
And Steve, you mentioned it, Tyler Perkins is now the leading scorer on the team with 13.5 points per game. He scored 22 points the other day in Villanova's win against Marquette. He's gotten a lot of comparison on social media and in the press conferences to Josh Hart. What has impressed you the most about Perkins, and what is his role as you look ahead to the possible NCAA tournament, the Big East tournament? Is he the guy, the scorer on this Villanova team now?
He's the guy, but I'm not sure he's the scorer. I'm going to try to separate a little bit, David, if I could. He's the guy because he affects winning more than anybody else on the floor, and that's offensive rebounding. That's blocking a shot at the buzzer. All those things that draw the comparisons to Josh Hart that's the way Josh Hart could affect the game. He could score 10 points and be the best player on the court. And there's not a lot of guys in college basketball in Josh's era or in this era that can do that. They need to score 20 points to have that kind of impact on a game. Tyler Perkins is a player who can score 12, can score 14, or can get you 22 like he did the other night and have an impact on the game. And he impacts winning, not just like they call them stat sheet stuffers. He does that, but he does that impacting winning.
I like that. Yeah, Perkins, and the dialogue around him is that he isn't just a scorer, he's a great defender. He's been the best on-ball defender for Villanova arguably this whole season. But let's shift the focus over to somebody who started out kind of as the consensus guy, but ever since conference play started has struggled. Bryce Lindsay hasn't scored more than 11 points since that big win at Hinkle Fieldhouse on January 3rd against Butler. Coach Willard said he still has big confidence in him and that he's going to keep him in the starting lineup. We're just curious, why do you think Lindsay has struggled in Big East play, especially from beyond the arc?
I think he's been the focal point of the other team's scouting report, which is probably not a role that he had earlier in the year. Hey, you got a James Madison transfer here. They had the big game opening against BYU. That got people's attention. And I just think it's the bigger physical defenders that he's had to face in conference play as opposed to the preseason. And once you get into conference play, the scouting reports are so in-depth. You play each team twice, so that they get all that film on you, and they see what's successful. And that's really what they've been doing to Bryce is they've been really physical with him. I thought the last two games, I thought Georgetown and Marquette, he was getting good looks. I thought prior to that, he was having a hard time getting good looks. Yep. The last two games, he got better looks. Wasn't able to knock them down, but I have confidence like Coach Will. If he gets those kind of looks, he'll be able to knock them down moving forward. And just think what Villanova's been able to do during this stretch where he's been a little bit off his game offensively and has still been able to win. If we can get Bryce Lindsay back to what we saw in December, this team's got a really good future down the road here in the March.
I totally agree. If you're just joining us out there, Steve Pinone is with us talking Villanova men's basketball alongside Stephen Cain, and I'm David Szczepanski. Steve, I want to talk about one of the fellow guards in the starting lineup with Bryce Lindsay, Cain Lewis, the star freshman from Washington, D.C., had 26 points in his homecoming there against Georgetown this past weekend. He scored at least 10 points in 5 of his last 6 games, excluding the overtime loss against UConn. Just how important is a Cain Lewis to this team, and what have you really seen from him throughout this freshman season?
He's extremely important to answer that question because he's got the ball in his hands. So he is the decision maker for this team. I think I was looking back on the Marquette game the other night. When we got bogged down a little bit, Marquette went up 9 with 4:20 to go. The ball wasn't moving, which is so unusual for this team. This team is like a 16 assist on 23 field goal kind of team. They passed the ball. And then Caden started breaking the defense down. Finds Perkins for 2. He finds Hodge in the other corner. And his ability to finish at the rim, right and left-handed, is huge. I kid people. I say, you know what you need to be a good player? You got to be able to make layups. And people, layups. Kids at Division I, everyone makes layups. Not against 6'9" guys that make contact with you. He has the ability to finish with both hands. And now he's made some threes as of late. When his shooting improves, it's only going to help his ability to get to the rim that much more, make him that much more vary his offensive game, where he has the ability now, that mid-range game. But his ability to finish at the rim, I think, is what makes him unique at his position and at his age.
Yeah, he's been really the heartbeat of this team, right? Getting the go-ahead bucket, having a bunch of assists, and really playing great in that second half, right? He had 15 points in the win on Tuesday against Marquette.
Was the difference maker in the final 20 minutes.
Yeah,
really was.
He was really great. And we're also curious, too, I guess your thoughts on Matt Hodge as well. He played really well, especially down the stretch. He made a big 3 in the second half that kind of rattled in and gave Villanova some life. Just kind of your thoughts on what he brings. It feels like that you almost don't know what you're going to get, and that can be a compliment in a sense. He'll have games where he'll struggle offensively, and then he'll have other games where he'll just go berserk from beyond the arc and be a really good defender. So just kind of want to get your thoughts on it.
I think Matt's been kind of a freshman. He's having a couple of those games where the ball's not going in. What I'd like to see him do a little better is rebound, because he's got to play at the 4 as a freshman. But, so the other night I think he had 13 points, 4 rebounds in about 23 and a half minutes. I'd love to see that number be 6 rebounds. So that's maybe the one thing you'd like to see him get more engaged in. But his ability to stretch the defense, I think, has been huge for this team. And what I love about him is he'll go 0 for 6. He's the guy on the bench that's cheering for his teammates. He's all in on Villanova. He's all in on his teammates. And this could be said about a lot of these guys, but I just think, when they used to say, oh, he's a Villanova guy, Matt Hodge, to me, is that kind of player. He'll do whatever it takes for his team to win. He'll do anything defensively. We're going to get him up on the boards a little bit more. Coach Willard's been on him about that all year. You got to remember now, he missed a whole year and says, he did not get to play. Yep. And you take that away from a young person who's played basketball their whole life, there's going to be a little bit of growing pains. But I think overall, when you look at his numbers, if we said, hey, what's Matt Hodge going to do on August 1st, we'd sign up for the numbers he's given us this year.
For Villanova, the worst loss of the season for the Wildcats was against Creighton at the Finn a few weeks ago, and Villanova will take on Creighton once again in Omaha on Valentine's Day this Saturday. It was a 76-72 loss for the Wildcats, a quad 3 loss as of right now. What are your keys to the game for the Wildcats to avoid the season sweep against the Blue Jays?
Yeah, anytime you go out to Omaha, the key for them is they want to score quickly. They like to shoot in the first 7-8 seconds of the shot clock, and you got to defend the three. Like the kid Isaac Trout, who had 5 threes against Seton Hall, he goes 0 for 5 last night against DePaul. He's a 5-man. He's going to take Duke Brennan out away from the bat. If he's on, that makes it tough for you. But I think what's happened with Creighton is people are starting to figure him out a little bit in terms of what they did to Villanova. They had a stretch in the second half where they scored on 21 out of 25 possessions. Villanova was just unable to stop their mid-range game. Usually at home they shoot more threes. I think long rebounds are going to be key. Villanova wins the rebound battle and can force some turnovers, which is going to be difficult against Creighton because they don't possess the ball a long time in the shot clock. So they're 3 passes shot up. So it's hard to force turnovers. When teams hold the ball, you have more opportunity to create some turnovers. But I'd love to see Villanova win the turnover battle and the rebound battle and try to even up the season series.
And one specific player that I want to focus on here is Jason Green for Creighton, who's averaging almost 11 points per game, almost had a double-double against Villanova, 10 points, 7 rebounds. This is obviously a different Creighton team than over the last couple of years where you had, Ryan Kalkbrenner, you had Baylor Shireman. What is this kind of new generation, if you will, Blue Jays looked like, and what has impressed you about players like Jason Green?
I think he's their most athletic player on the roster. He's good. He was their top defender last year where they had all those other names that you just mentioned with Kalkbrenner kind of holding it down, but he could shut down that wing scorer. You could put him on an Eric Dixon type, or you could go and put him against Connecticut. He could play a Caravan or a wing player. His versatility defensively is very important for them. Dix, the Iowa transfer. The kid Schwartz played well against us too. Everyone played well. We couldn't stop them. They scored 21 out of 25 possessions. So I think for Green, though, especially, keep him off the glass. Don't let him get to spots where he's comfortable. Try to make him shoot the ball from the perimeter with a hand in his face.
Yeah. Hopefully Villanova can even up the season series between the two teams. Big quad 2 opportunity. And again, want to get your thoughts for Villanova, their tournament outlook right now. A lot of bracketologists, Joe Lenardi in particular, Villanova as an 8 seed at the moment. How do you feel about Villanova's chances? They do look pretty good in terms of breaking that 3-year March Madness streak.
Yeah, I think we'd all be disappointed if they don't take care of business down the stretch. I think it's 7 games left. Starting Saturday at Creighton, and they have a 2-game road trip this week. They go to Xavier after that, and then they come home for Connecticut. So it's a big 3-game stretch. It's a stretch you could say, hey, they could lose 2 in a row, and then you're playing the number 3 team in the country. Could they lose 3 straight? Or if they find a way to win these 3 games, or 2 of these 3 games, they're really sitting in great shape going down the home stretch. So I think Coach Willard's the old coaching cliche, 1 day at a time, 1 game at a time, but I think he's kept these kids in the moment. They go out to Michigan and play Michigan as a juggernaut at the time. They get beat 30 in the first half, but they don't put their heads down. They come back, have a really good performance. I think against Pitt was the next game. They played very well against them. So I think this team, win or lose, has kind of maintained that kind of equilibrium you want to see. Don't get too high, don't get too low. So I think that bodes well as we come down the stretch. If they do stub their toe in one place, they'll probably bounce back and get one they weren't supposed to.
And Steve, our final question for you. There's been a lot of talk around, the Big East, or the top 3 teams, Villanova, St. John's, and UConn have all kind of separated themselves from the rest of the conference, at least for the moment, with Seton Hall and Creighton battling for that 4th and 5th seed. What are your thoughts on the Big East right now? Who do you think is the team to beat? I know St. John's obviously with a big win at MSG against UConn. Where do you kind of see the Big East standings heading into the Big East tournament? Still a month left to go, but something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I think those 2 teams have separated themselves. They're 1 and 2 or 1 and 1A.
Sure.
Let's see what happens when they have to go back and play them at Stores. UConn probably be favored in that game.
Absolutely.
And then if the Chalkholds, they would play in the Big East championship game, which St. John's would maybe have the advantage being at Madison Square Garden. I do think those 2 are at a certain level right now, and then Villanova is at the next level, and then really 4 to 11 is we saw the other night. Marquette, I think, came in 11th place and really should have won the game. They're up 9 with 4:20 to go and don't win. We saw DePaul beat Creighton last night. And Butler's playing UConn last night. They're up in the second half, and UConn had a nice late run to pull away. So I think the league right now is a little bit tiered. And people say, the league's down. They're only get 3 teams. I think the bottom's gotten a lot better. maybe we don't have as many good teams at the top, but the middle is a grind. Anywhere from, we went to Georgetown, we saw how that game went. We still got to go to Xavier twice. We still haven't played them. It's a grinding league, the physicality of the league, and I think the understanding the coaches knowing everybody so well. It's kind of this Northeast. Everyone kind of knows each other, so they know. Like Kevin Wood mentioned after the Georgetown game here, Ed Cooley knows every play I'm running. I know every play Ed's running. It's hard to get anything going offensively, and I think that's really been an issue for this team. And then now to talk about this revenue share. If some teams are going to spend 2x, if other teams, it's going to be hard for those teams to compete. I saw Dan Hurley talk about this with Butler last night. DePaul's had an issue. It's kind of, I don't want to say it's the haves and the have-nots, but once they kind of figure out where your fit is, what Villanova is going to do in revenue sharing, what Xavier's going to do, I think we'll have a better, cleaner look at what the league's going to look like.
And I really liked what you said about, the Big East standings, how kind of that middle and really bottom of the pack is really anybody's game. And I think that's going to make for a better Big East tournament this year. I mean, Villanova's been the 6th seed the last few years, and, whoever they've been playing as the 11th seed, whether that's been a DePaul or a Seton Hall, Villanova's pretty much dominated in those 6th seed matchups. This year, I feel like it's kind of anybody's game, even in those 6-11 matchups. I mean, a Marquette team, even a Providence team is going to be tough with their offense.
Well, that was interesting. I was talking to some of our alums and donors the other day, and it's like, well, who do you want to play if we're going to be the 3? And they're like, one guy says Providence, one guy says Butler, one guy says Marquette, one guy says DePaul. There's no consent. In the old days, we hope so-and-so wins that game, so we play him. But to your point, David, I don't know who 6 is going to be, but it's going to be a hard game.
It definitely is, and I think it's going to make for a really fun Big East tournament this year, especially with UConn, St. John's, Villanova, all in the Northeast at the top of the conference. Going to be a really fun battle. I want to thank Steve Pinone for joining us. Steve, thank you so much for taking some time.
Thanks,
to talk
guys.
with
I
us.
Appreciate all the work you guys are doing to keep Villanova athletics alive, and the student radio is such an important pack to get you guys started on what's going to be long careers for you.
I appreciate that so much. Again, national champion Steve Pinone, phenomenal broadcaster on the Villanova Sports Network. We'll take a break here on WXVU. When we come back, we'll talk about the poll questions, recap, and of course, highlight our coverage this Saturday for men's lacrosse against St. Joe's. Again, you're listening to WXVU, V89.1, The Roar. Welcome back to Villanova Sports Talk here on WXVU. Again, I want to thank Steve Pinone, national champion, for joining us here on WXVU. David Szczepanski alongside Stephen Cain. Final 10 or so minutes coming up here on Villanova Sports Talk. The show always flies by, right? You started with men's lacrosse with Mike. We've touched on so many different sports here on this episode of Villanova Sports Talk, so I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Hope you've enjoyed the episode so far. Steve, before we get to the poll questions, again, last chance to vote on my Twitter, at WXVU David S. want to touch on Villanova's resume, the Wildcats. Right now, 32 in the net ranking, 3-4 in Quad 1, 4-0 in Quad 2 opportunities, and I guess kind of the big difference maker, we didn't talk about it a whole lot last week, but that loss for Villanova against Creighton at home here at the Finn did shift from a Quad 2 to a Quad 3 loss, so that hurt the resume a few days ago, more like a week ago. But Villanova's still in good shape. Right? We talked about it, Steve Pinone, the Wildcats in control of the 3rd seed, that 3 seed in the Big East, and the March Madness chance is still at about 97-98% according to Bart Torvik. So Villanova's in good shape, but definitely want to keep an eye on that Quad 3 loss for Creighton, and that's why this is a big game against the Blue Jays. You don't want to get swept against a team that unless they go on a run and win the Big East tournament, is not going to make March Madness.
No, you don't. And again, I was definitely surprised when Villanova made the comeback off air. I was making some remarks that Villanova probably wasn't going to come back. It just felt like one of those games. And then they do come back. And I even remember saying, and again, I was a little overly negative, right, at that point when Ben Gold hit the 3 and Marquette was up 9, that Villanova, if they lost that game to Marquette on Tuesday, their resume is very good, don't get it twisted, but the Big East is a little bit down in terms of just tournament level teams. And again, these are how these resumes are determined. Who have you beat that's also in the tournament? You have your big wins, Wisconsin, Seton Hall, Butler. But again, it's really going to come down to, in terms of really solidifying that resume, right? Villanova's in a good spot right now, but again, they are kind of in a spot, and again, Steve Pinone touched on it, where they could just lose to Creighton and Xavier and then maybe UConn, and now you're 19-8, and all of a sudden you're like, uh-oh, what's going on here, at that point, because you have 2 Quad 2 losses, it can kind of change the outlook of things very quickly, right? Because the Big East hasn't been as good as it has been in recent years. Not as many Quad 1 opportunities on the table, but really the story is Villanova's just won the games that they've been favored to win, minus the Creighton game. So that's really why they're in a good spot right now.
Let's take a look at the women's basketball net rankings. The Wildcats have climbed a few spots since we talked last week, up to number 37. The Wildcats are 20-5 dive in Big East play again, coming off of that 40-point win against Xavier last night at the Cintas Center in Cincinnati. And, the resume is still fairly the same, right? 1-1 in quad 1 opportunities, 2-3 in quad 2 opportunities, 3-1 in quad 3, and 14-0. And there was a change, was the loss to, I believe, Fairfield got bumped back up to a quad 2. Is that correct, Steve? I know we were talking about a little bit off air. Yeah. So it is now 3 quad 2 losses, only 1 quad 3 loss, which helped Villanova's net ranking, helped the resume. So again, the 3 quad 2 losses are the Princeton, the Fairfield, and the St. John's loss on the road. Is that correct, Steve? I know we were going back and forth because they're really right on the edge. I mean, basically 3 of the 4 losses for Villanova this year are right on that edge between quad 2 and quad 3. The loss to St. John's on the road, I believe, is that quad 3.
It's quad 3.
Quad 3.
It's the worst game of the
so the Marquette loss is the quad 2 loss. That's correct. Yeah. So and then of course Fairfield and Princeton. So Villanova's resume did change a little bit, right? They had 2 quad 3 losses last week. They have 1 quad 3 loss now. So that's good. And you continue to want to see Fairfield, Princeton play well. In addition to, at least you want to see St. John's and Marquette stay competitive. But then also, you're kind of battling with Marquette for that 3 seed or that 2 seed, 3 seed in a sense in terms of the Big East tournament. What are your thoughts on the women's basketball net rankings right now? But the Wildcats resume in a better spot than it was last week.
They're in a fine spot. They did move up 1 spot in the latest ESPN Women's Basketball Bracketology updates, and now they're the second to last team in the 64-team field, so they would skip the first 4 as things currently stand. But again, look, talk about the men's resume, kind of the cupboard being bare in terms of opportunities for quad 1, quad 2 games. For the women, 14 of their 20 wins are quad 4 wins.
Sure.
Right, and only 2 of them, I believe, if I'm counting it right. You have the big win against West Virginia, and then for quad 2, in terms of the quad 2 win, it is against, I believe, Seton Hall, which is a big win there. So, but besides that, right, you have the Marquette loss, you have the Fairfield loss, you have the Princeton loss.
And Villanova needs West Virginia to keep playing well.
Yeah.
I mean, they need that quad 1 win to stay. And the Mountaineers have played fairly well over the last month or so, but still something to monitor.
Yeah. So, again, in a good spot. Again, just thinking about it, they're at 20 wins. It sets up pretty nicely for them because at this point you really only want to lose to UConn. You want to beat Creighton on Sunday, quad 3 game, and then Marquette at home the 22nd. We'll have coverage for that quad 3 game, and then Seton Hall quad 2 game. You win those 3, you lose 1, then you're at 23-6. You get a bye, and then hopefully you win those 2 games. So you should, when it's all said and done, they should definitely be in and have an okay seed. Maybe they move out of the 10 seed line to a 9 or an 8. They hopefully should finish 25-7 to get 25 wins. Have 3 of your losses be to UConn. I think you're in a good spot.
I completely agree with that, and that's kind of the outlook as of right now when we sit here on Thursday, February the 12th. All right, Steve, let's get to our poll questions here on WXVU. We're going to talk about 4 of them. Our first one, again, you can vote on my Twitter at WXVU David S. Who was the player of the week for Villanova men's basketball? Cain Lewis, Duke Brennan, Tyler Perkins, or Matt Hodge?
I think Tyler Perkins, just because of the heroics he provided, hit 3 threes down the stretch that kept Villanova in it, had a big steal, knocked down some free throws that gave Villanova some breathing room after Lewis had the go-ahead bucket. It got a big defensive rebound that led to that also led to an extra possession for Villanova, and then had the game-winning block. I think it's Perkins. He's the guy, I think, right? I know Steve Pinone wanted to make a distinction, but not here. I think he's the best player right now. I mean, I think it's very close. It's a deep team, but he does it all. He's done it all for this team.
And I agree. 78% of the voters saying Tyler Perkins, 22% for Cain Lewis. And Lewis has played well over the last couple weeks. I mean, 5 points there against Georgetown in his, homecoming there to DC. He scored at least 10 points in 5 of the last 6, as I mentioned earlier when Steve Pinone was on the show. And, we didn't get a chance to dive into it a whole lot, but Steve Pinone did touch on it, right? He missed 2 big free throws and then came back and made 2 big free throws for Villanova. And that was a big, positive point in that run where Villanova ended the game on an 11-2 run in the final 2 minutes and 45 seconds or so of the game against the Golden Eagles. That was a difference maker because Marquette was up by 9 with about 4 minutes left to go, as Steve also mentioned. So that was definitely something to highlight. But Perkins, just the way he's played, over the last, couple months here in Big East play. He's now the leading scorer, averaging 13.5 points per game. There's been so many, comparisons, to him and, of course, Josh Hart in a lot of the press conferences. But, he does it on both ends of the floor. And what also, too, I thought was telling doing is, Kevin Willard said that he wasn't happy with Tyler Perkins' performance the other day, especially defensively, and Perkins agreed with him. But, he scored 22 points, had the game-winning block, and, I think it just goes to show you that there are high expectations around Tyler Perkins and this Villanova team. Poll question 2, what will be the final result of Saturday's game against Creighton in Omaha? Villanova wins by 1 to 6 points. Villanova wins by 7+. Creighton wins by 1 to 5 points. Creighton wins by 6+. Steve, where do you fall? This is a pretty fairly close vote when it comes to a lot of the listeners and voters.
I think 1 to 6. I think it's going to be a tough game. I know people are down on Creighton, but it's just such a tough place to play. Steve Pinone touched on it. It's a very hostile environment, and I think Villanova, that is something that we are going to have to address. I think kind of the hoopla and all the excitement of the win and them coming back is great, but I think that's kind of washed off for me personally, that it still wasn't up to the standard of Villanova basketball that they should have. I mean, they were favored by almost 12 or 13 points. So I feel like they'll continue to kind of work out those kinks. Maybe they struggle a little bit again. They're only favored by 3 on Saturday, so we'll see how they kind of handle that. But I think they win by 5 or 6. I think it'll be another testy one.
I think they win the game by 7+. Just the way that Villanova played in that first matchup defensively against Creighton, the way that the Blue Jays have struggled, lost to DePaul last night. I know that game was on the road for them, and yes, the Chi Health Center is an incredibly difficult place to play there in Omaha, Nebraska. I feel like Kevin Willard, the job that he's done to make adjustments, especially just in the second half of games, to have a little bit more than a month to really focus on this Creighton game, and obviously Villanova's been playing other games, and I know that he's been focused on them, but you have to think that this team has this game against Creighton circled on the calendar since the loss. You don't want to get swept by the Blue Jays in the season. Again, a team that's not going to make March Madness unless they win the Big East tournament, at least as of right now. So, again, they're kind of on the edge, in terms of the Blue Jays. We'll see what happens, but their resume has continued to struggle over the last couple of weeks with some losses. So I think Villanova wins this game. I don't think they win it by double digits, but I would say 8 or 9 points when it's all said and done. 58% of the listeners out there and the voters saying Villanova wins by 1 to 6. 22% saying Villanova wins by 7+. The rest going for Creighton wins by 1 to 5 points. Poll question 3, with the Wildcats' victory against Xavier last night, Villanova is now 20-5 this season. How many wins will the women's basketball team finish with in the regular season? Just for our listeners and voters out there, the 4 games coming up: at Creighton versus UConn versus Marquette, and at Seton Hall. So the Wildcats finish with 20 to 21 wins, 22 wins, 23 wins, or 24 wins. Again, in the regular season, excluding Big East tournament play.
I think they win all their games except UConn. So that put them at 23 wins. That would be my answer, and I think they'll be the number 2 seed and hopefully avoid UConn until the championship for the Big East tournament. Also want to update as well, Seton Hall as well. Apologies, we were doing the women's resume. James Madison quad 2 game. That was another great win for Villanova in the early part of their non-con schedule. Seton Hall, I believe that was a quad 3 game. That's now, I believe, changed to quad 2. So that's another quad 2 win. So make that 3 quad 1 or 2 wins for the women's basketball Wildcats. Good news with also Fairfield, that being bumped up to quad 2. Just wanted to get that out there.
I'm going to say the Wildcats split the last 4. I think they win 2 games, I think they lose 2. I do think they drop the game on the road at Seton Hall, which would be a tough loss. As of right now, we'll have to see if the offense continues to play like the way it did last night. It's going to be a close battle. Similar to what I was just saying about Villanova circling the game against Creighton for men's basketball, this Seton Hall team, they want revenge for that first game early on in the Big East schedule against the women's basketball team. So I'm going to say they finish with 22 wins as of right now, but I wouldn't be surprised if they finish with 23 wins and defeat Seton Hall. I think that's going to be a very close game. I think it's a toss-up 50-50. I just think you have to give Seton Hall the edge because I think Seton Hall is looking for that win a little bit more than Villanova, just because the chances for Villanova are a little bit more favorable in terms of March Madness. And in addition to that, that game is, at Seton Hall, right? It's on the road, a tough place to win in that small gymnasium. So I'm going to say 22%, but very close again. The polls, 44% saying 22%, 44% of the voters saying 22 wins, 41% saying 23 wins, and then 12.5% saying 24 wins. And to get to 24 wins, they would have to also defeat UConn, which is a very tough task to do, even at the Finn. Poll question 4, our final one: which team has the best chance of winning the Big East tournament as of right now? UConn, St. John's, or Villanova? All close, and this is a very tough question. Steve, where do you fall?
You said the Big East tournament, correct?
Yes, the Big East tournament, yep.
Okay. Yeah, I think St. John's, kind of the easy answer, just because they play at Madison Square Garden. I think that they're really starting to figure it out. I think they're playing just a really good season, if that makes sense. they did the right thing in terms of really testing the team early. I like how Pinone was able to set up just a brutal early stretch of games, and then they lose a bunch, and it kind of throws the media off a little bit. Then there's a little bit less attention on you, and then quietly, once when conference play started, St. John's has really found their footing. I feel like they're really turning it on. I think they lose the second matchup to UConn in Stores, and then they probably meet in the championship for the trilogy fight, so to speak. But St. John's just really impresses me. I just think when it just gets super physical and neither team is really making their shots. If one team makes their shots, then of course UConn can win. But I'm just saying, if it's kind of a low-scoring battle and it's back and forth, it's sloppy, it comes down to foul shooting and toughness inside the two-point arc. I think it's going to be St. John's. I think Villanova, though, they could sneak into the championship game. I don't know if they could win it. They'd have to take down one of those two teams on a neutral or away floor.
That's a good point. I'm going to go with St. John's as well. And I know that we obviously have a lot of Villanova listeners out there tuning in, but St. John's received the last of the three teams in votes. 40% for UConn, 31% for Villanova, 29% for St. John's. And the way that, Coach Pitino has his team playing, I think you have to go with St. John's as of right now. After the win against UConn, I mean, to be fair, we haven't seen what the result looks like at Stores, Steve, as you mentioned, which is probably in favor of UConn, one of the best teams still in the country. But, I mean, St. John's handed UConn its first loss since the non-conference schedule back in November. I mean, I think the Red Storm are playing its best basketball. Yes, they did struggle a little bit at the beginning of the season, but, I mean, their resume is as good as a lot of teams out there. And, they're going to be a tough team to defeat, especially, like you said, because the Big East tournament is at Madison Square Garden. I mean, it's a pretty heavy home field advantage for St. John's.
Yeah, and two, the fact that, right, and every team has to do this, I'm aware of that, but I just think when you have to play day after day, right, I know Villanova will get the bye, but think they make it to Saturday, which I think is possible, right? Like the 3 seed, they could have a good path, maybe make it to the championship by then. It's day 3. And of course, I just think it probably favors the better team at that point. You could argue definitely either way. You could say, oh well, what about UConn and St. John's? They could be tired too. But I don't know. I just think it's going to be really difficult.
And Villanova's going to have the toughest matchup of the 3, right? As of right now, they're going to face the 6th seed, which, as we talked about, Steve Pinone, really could be anybody. But you have to kind of think, even though a lot of teams are kind of close there, you're probably going to be playing a Xavier, a Butler, which are competitive teams in the Big East. So we'll see how that exactly works out. But I think it could be a tough matchup for Villanova, and I think the day 3 part of it is something to bring up, especially because if it does get to day 3 and St. John's, Villanova, or someone matchup, just with that arena, I feel like the home field advantage will be much different for, even if they're tired, a St. John's team playing in their own arena with their own fans. I think that's going to be something to keep an eye on as we continue on. But I think a good discussion to have. We'll continue to talk about it here on Villanova Sports Talk. Well, that will do it for another action-packed episode here on WXVU. And week by week, we just keep getting more action, and it's great to talk about so many different Villanova sports as we did in this one. Started with men's lacrosse talk with Mike, talked about the women's lacrosse team, talked about the win for the women's basketball team against Xavier last night. Of course, the men's basketball team, some football news with Garrett Rogan coming back for Villanova. That's good news for the secondary. So a lot of different things to discuss as always here on WXVU, but so glad you could join us. As always, if you missed any of today's episode, you can tune in on Spotify, you can tune in on YouTube as well. So many different ways to tune in and continue to get Villanova content. You can follow me on Twitter at WXVU David S. And we'll have coverage for you this Saturday on Valentine's Day, Villanova versus St. Joe's at Villanova Stadium. Men's lacrosse. Our pregame show will begin at 11:45 a.m. and opening face-off is at noon. Mike Micceri and I will have the call. Thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll see you 1 week from today on Thursday, February the 19th, as Stephen Cain and I will be right back for another episode. Again, want to thank everybody for tuning in. For Stephen Cain, I'm David Szczepanski. This has been Villanova Sports Talk. Have a great rest of your day. Again, thank you to Steve Pinone for joining us here on WXVU. And as always, go Cats!